Hello, my name is Darren Thomas and I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. In this video, I'm going to try to give you some insights into developing essay items for exams. So we're going to talk about three things in this particular lecture or this presentation. I'm going to explain to you when to use essay items. I'm going to expose you to different types of essay items, and I'm also going to give you some tips and some suggestions on how to create essay items. So the first thing we're going to talk about is when to use essay items. Now, there are three things you need to consider: the class size, your concern with cheating, and the level of thinking you're trying to assess on the actual essay exam or essay item, if you will. Now, preferably, essay items are used for smaller classes. Now, what's large, what is small depends on the teacher. Generally, in my experience, 20 to 25 or less is when essay items are acceptable. Anything beyond about 25, you probably want to step away from using essay items because the class is getting too big in terms of having to sit down and read several paragraphs or even pages of student responses. Another time when you might want to use essay items is when you want to discourage cheating. Essay items normally require a lot of original creative thinking, which makes it very difficult for students to copy from one another effectively. In comparison to, for example, multiple choice, where all you got to do is look over your friend's shoulder to find out if it's A, B, C, or D. Essay items tend to be very, very unique in terms of how the student is responding. And if a student chooses to cheat, it is often much easier to identify versus trying to examine what is happening when they're doing multiple choice, true and false matching, etc. Because, like I said before, the potential answers are much more open-ended. A last reason you want to consider using essay items is when you're trying to assess higher level thinking skills, the ability to synthesize, compare and contrast, the ability to evaluate, the ability to be creative. These are all skills that often cannot be captured in other forms of assessment, like I've already mentioned, matching, fill in the blank, multiple choice, etc. So when your goal is to really try to get an understanding in how their minds are working and their ability to not only digest content, but to actually be able to, do something with it, essay items may be appropriate for you. Now, there are many, many types of essay items, but we're going to focus on two types. And the two types that we're going to look at here are long response and limited response. I think you can already tell from their names, kind of how they are, but let's take a look at each one individually. So a long response item is complex. It involves several paragraphs, and it addresses some sort of a challenging question that requires deep thought. And so you can see right here, we have an example. Compare and contrast ancient Egypt and ancient Mesopotamia. Consider the geographic, economic, social, and military approaches. Your response will be graded upon accuracy, depth of thinking, organization, and clarity. This is an example of an essay item that will require a long time to think and complete. The student has to compare and contrast two different civilizations. That's definitely higher level thinking. Then the student must cover the following topics: geographic, economic, social, and military approaches. Okay, those are one, two, three, four different things that they have to compare and contrast each nation. And then after that, the last sentence tells you how they're going to be graded on their accuracy, depth of thought, organization, and clarity. This is long response. And so the student is highly challenged. It's very difficult to cheat, and every response should be highly original. Now, of course, there's also limited response, which is also useful in different contexts. Here's what a limited response is. You are asked to recall information in an organized manner, and the answer is normally 1 to 2 paragraphs in length. And so right here we have an example. Explain two differences between ancient Egypt and ancient Mesopotamia. So this response is much more limited. You only got to find any kind of difference. It doesn't have to be economic or geographic or military. No. You just find two differences. And so you pick two of them and you tell me how they're different, you're done. So this kind of a response will probably have only 2 paragraphs. In the first paragraph, you talk about one difference. In the second paragraph, you talk about the second difference. This is why it's limited. The scope of the answer is restricted by how the essay item is worded. That's what it is. So we're now moving to the last part here. I want to explain briefly how you can go about writing essay items. I want you to focus on the words in red here. The words in yellow. So there are 3 things that need to be a part of an essay item that hopefully will help it to be clearer. So you need to have a condition. That's some sort of like the context of the question. Action. That's our second word here. This is what you want the student to do. What are they going to do in their writing? And proficiency. In other words, what do they have to do in their writing in order to get maximum credit that they want? So let's read this example real quick. Within Southeast Asia, predict which country will have the strongest economic growth over the next 20 years. You will be assessed upon the clarity, content, organization, and depth of thinking of your response. Your response should be 1,000 to 1,500 words. So, our condition or context is, right here. It's Southeast Asia, like so. And what is our action? Our action is to predict the country that will have the strongest economic growth over the next 20 years. This is what we are going to do in the essay, and the essay is focused on Southeast Asia. Now, this last part right here, all this right here is basically the proficiency. You know, you have to focus on your clarity, your content, your organization, and your depth of thinking. And the response needs to be 1,000 to 1,500 words. In other words, if you want full credit, you will make sure you have excellent clarity, excellent content, excellent organization, depth of thought, and your response will be 1,000 to 1,500 words. This is very, very clear, and it really helps a student to have success. So, in this video, we looked at how to empower our essay items as educators. There are several things you have to keep in mind. You have to decide when are you going to use essay. Keep in mind the class size, whether or not you're dealing with challenges with cheating, and also if you're what type of thinking you're trying to assess. Also, you want to consider the type of essay. You got the long response, which is really tough. Lots of different layers happening there, and you also have the restricted essay or limited response as another option. And lastly, you want to keep in mind the three criteria, or the three components to an essay item. Some sort of a context in which they have to write, what exactly it is they have to do in their writing, and also the proficiency. At what level do they have to do these things in order to receive the maximum credit? So, my name is Darren Thomas, and I'm the Director of Educational Research Techniques. Thank you for listening to this video.